It's kind of funny having this image up with the title.
Absorb it.
I didn't even think about that connection. All right. What's up, folks?
Can we get some confirmation on the 182? That seems, I mean, that's ambitious.
Yeah, sounds like some Taliban propaganda, maybe. It's kind of like China. Always, every time you get a report about some statistic involving China from
An immediate dislike.
CCP, it's like immediately.
Oh, this is awesome.
And you take any fact you get about China from the CCP and just assume that it's inflated, assume that it's exaggerated. So maybe it's kind of the same thing with the Taliban. Shout out Alexander Cortez for a spicy little meatball. All right, let's pop this down and see our shining faces. Hey there, folks. This is us.
Hey, Daddy.
Welcome to King Build. We're running late, as usual. And as usual, I have a good excuse, because all of my excuses are the best excuses. So I'm getting our supporting listeners group set up because officially, formally, our Subscribe Star is up and running. If you look in... actually, no, I need to replace this here. That was the other thing I needed to do. I needed to fix the bio. Give me just a second, and then you'll be able to refresh, and the bio will have the link if you want to just click directly on it, or you can go to subscribestar.com/kingpilled, and you can give us money for all of you who have been wanting us to set up something like that. Now, here's the catch. Right now, I'm not entirely sure which platform we're going to use for the supporting listeners group. I found one that I wanted, that I was trying to set up, and I don't know if it's going to be too complicated. I don't know if the complication for getting into it is going to be perhaps a perk for weeding out the riffraff. But what I'll just tell you is that if you sign up, just wait to get a message. I'll reach out to you and send you a message so that you can we can try to initiate the process of getting everyone into the supporting listeners group. And then if the app that I'm trying to use doesn't work out, it isn't a good option or whatever, then we'll probably just pivot over to something like Discord or Signal or something like that. But once we get you guys in there, we'll figure out something that works for everyone.
Once we have 1,000 supporting listeners, we will tell you where the supporting listeners group for those supporting listeners are. Yeah. That's what Matthew is saying right now.
Exactly. Just 1,000 of you guys. There's 1,000 of you came and subscribed here. Now just 1,000 of you have to go subscribe over there, and everything will be all good.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out Caleb.
Incrementalist approach.
Shout out Caleb Brown. Shameless plug in. He's having on Pete Quinones September 3rd to talk about the atheist problem in libertarianism. How appropriate. That's, as you can probably tell by the title of today's show, that is something that we wanted to touch on today. Let's see here. Popular Liberty says, "Did you watch my China vid?" Yes, I did. That was really, really interesting. I realized I didn't know very much about China. I mean, I already knew I didn't know very much, but I didn't realize just how much I didn't know. If you haven't yet, go over to Popular Liberty's channel and watch his breakdown on why China isn't a threat. He uses principles of archetropism and the art of war to indicate all of the vulnerabilities that China has, both geographic and economic and demographic, and made a really strong case for why the U.S. should not perceive China as a legitimate military threat. The question I would have, the level I would want to go kind of a little deeper than that would be I don't think it's very useful in the long run to think of nation states as sovereign actors, as like independent units that function as a standalone entity, because ultimately they are, with very rare exceptions, they're going to do whatever the leaders of the country's financiers want them to do. And sometimes sometimes you'll get countries that will act against their own, what would be their own self-interest, because the people involved will benefit from it in some way or another. So you can't, I don't feel like you can necessarily look at sovereign nations and think of them as sovereign nations, as sovereign actors. I think that the actual sovereignty lies further up the chain than that. And so for that reason, I don't think that the fact that China has all these things that act, all these things that would um, compromise them acting as some kind of a military threat or some type of a threat to the world. I don't think that that's necessarily evidence then that they won't do those things. They might do something that's just not in their self-interest. But either way, I don't really see, like, I'm not someone who lays awake at night worrying about what China is going to do. Ultimately, I posted something on Facebook a couple years ago, and I didn't realize what I was onto when I did. But I said that the United States, I can't remember how I framed it, but I said something like the United States and China are moving toward each other. Like they're both moving. The China is becoming more like the United States. The United States is becoming more like China. They're kind of moving to an equilibrium, and uh, and I can't remember. Yeah, I wish I could remember how I phrased it, because it was kind of, I phrased it in a way that you could kind of take it to mean both things, but basically that America is becoming China and China is becoming America, and at that time, what I was kind of seeing with China was that China was functioning more and more um, as explicitly capitalist, and America specifically was the social credit score thing that I was thinking of. I didn't think it was going to happen as fast as it has, but that was kind of my thought at the time. And what do you know? We're basically at that point now. That kind of gets into a little bit of what I was thinking about talking about today. Uh, Carlos Abelar in the chat. He says, I'm interviewing Pete Quinones tonight and Matt and Amy next week. Orale. Yeah, my beautiful wife, Amy, and I are going to be going on Los Libertinos and talking to Carlos next Thursday. So I'm very much looking forward to doing that. We both are. We're going to have a good chat. And this will be Amy's first real podcast interview. She's been on Jason's show at least once, if not more than once. I don't remember. But this will be her first time being the subject of an interview, and she's looking forward to it. So hopefully you guys will show up for that and let her know how amazing she is and how much you guys appreciate her. Have you ever walked down the Doug Wilson rabbit holes? I'm curious what you guys would think. Blog and Mayblock is pretty good. Yeah, I've watched some videos of Doug Wilson and I like him. I've always he's kind of got like a good old boy sort of personality, but he's got an edge to him. And my family is very much into the Reformed circles, and so from them, I've been exposed to him. I haven't listened to a ton of his stuff. I think I've probably heard 2 or 3 sermons of his. I heard him on a debate I think it was a debate about eschatology with John Piper and a couple other guys. I can't remember who. But it's interesting. Most recently, where I heard about Doug Wilson was from Jay Dyer, who a few of you guys have talked about knowing before. He's a really interesting Orthodox philosopher, theologian, I guess. And he is not a fan at all of Doug Wilson. But that gets into the clashes between the doctrinal clashes between Reformed and Orthodox, which I'm still educating myself on, so I won't really weigh in there. Stevie boy, how are you doing being heterosexual today?
Oh, so good. I just love all the girls.
Like all the girls just
sexually, yeah. Like I'm really attracted to them. You know what I mean? Just like it's hard to concentrate on the show because I'm always thinking about women and how much I desire them. So
yeah. So I mean, if you guys have ever gotten the inclination that Steven is not all about the honeys, I don't know what you guys are thinking.
That's what I have to say to you. If you think that, yeah, right.
You got to get a little head nod with it there.
My neck is sore. I'm not for undisclosed reasons, so I can't really move it right now. But that's between me and my physical therapist.
Yeah.
And Nathan, my physical therapist. So just know that you're wrong. You Yeah.
It seems like there's always something wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what you've come to grips with?
Man, this is a fun bit, but there's like a. All right. Every once in a while, my street will. Oh boy, I wish I could have flipped this camera around. That would have been the greatest thing. There's a little downtown like window that I'm in front of right now, and oh, good googly, Miss Moogly. Yeah, that would have been some supporting listeners content right there.
Are you on the ground level?
Attractive woman walking down the street, and you think that she is a sort of a loose moral character, and you think that you can have immediate sexual relations with this woman wearing a white dress and a high ponytail. God damn. You want to make sure that that you're feeling your best. And what better way to make sure that you're feeling your best than to just totally fucking overload your system with CBD products? And,
that was slick.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't know if they have any like sexual function benefits, so I don't want to make any false claims. Maybe Carlos can let us know in the chat. If the old boy needs a little extra help getting himself out of bed in the morning, you know what I'm saying, Carlos? I don't know how old you are. But anyway, yeah, there's it can't hurt the situation. I'm confident in saying that. But be sure to head over to our good friends Carlos and Vanessa Abelar's website, palomaverdecbd.com, and
spell that.
What did you say? Spell it?
Yeah.
Why?
Just so the listeners know.
Man,
what if they don't know?
This is 2021, and I think everyone that listens to us is younger than us right now. So if you don't have any, if you haven't taken the initiative to figure out some Spanish, I don't know what to tell you.
Yes, Green Paloma.
Palomaverdecbd.com. Goodness gracious.
There you go. PalomaVerdeCBD.com.
And be sure to use promo code KING.
That's
for
right.
25% off of your order. There's a litany of products. Our show is jam-packed today. You may think your antenna may be up that we don't have a lot to talk about today, but you're wrong. Okay? And when it comes to me, I'll just talk about the ladies all day. So PalomaVerdeCBD.com, promo code KING for all of your CBD needs. I'm certain that anyone listening to this, this is not Fisher Price, my first podcast. You listen to other podcasts, which means if you listen to other podcasts, you've been exposed to CBD. You've probably tried it.
You've probably had your mind corrupted by a bunch of very false, very fake promo codes that will not work. The only promo code that will work is promo code KING. You don't want to enter any of the other ones. The other ones, anything could happen. Literally anything. Your device could spontaneously combust in your hands if you enter one of the other promo codes.
I think
the only promo code that will suffice is promo code KING. That was a long, awkward silence. So shout out John Hartman. What's up, man? Nelson in the chat. He says CBD makes me sleep, so it does nothing for his eggplant. So there's one. It's not data. It's an anecdote. But what do they say about anecdotes and data? Anyways,
yeah.
And Nelson also says, Matt, you and Jason killed it on the podcast the other day. Thank you, buddy. That was something that I kind of wanted to touch on. I kind of wanted to elaborate on a little bit in this conversation. It was something that was on my mind because this is something that I think about a lot. And just so you guys know, there's an outside shot that we may have an interesting special guest pop into the video here in just a little bit. Don't know for sure, but
yeah. And I don't know how special is the guest? I mean,
extremely special.
Oh, well,
like
that sounds
like special.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah.
I might stick around for that.
Speaking of special guests and speaking of the ladies, we eventually remember you've been telling me about. We have we've got something we have to make happen at some point. Not too distant
heavens me! Heavens me, do we have do we have to make that happen?
We need to get some of that technology they use on like a what do you call it, like a documentary where you have like the person just like their silhouette and their voice, but their voice is garbled. We need to get something like that kind of set up so that
would be
so
some
we can
real
get
good
the
stuff right there.
insights from the field.
Oh man, I don't think people aren't ready.
No,
but it would be so good, man. Oh man.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, so Popular Liberty says that episode of Jason was fire. Yeah, that was it was funny watching. We showed up for that episode, and Jason and I talked ahead of time. We had something else that we wanted to talk about, but I showed up and he was like, yeah, scrap all that. I've been yelling at Mises Caucus people on Twitter all morning. We're going to talk about this, and I was like, hell, fucking yes, let's go.
And you know what? I was too.
Yeah. So,
thank you, Jason.
So if you guys haven't listened to, if you're coming across this later, or you're watching live and you haven't listened to the episode with Jason and I, then make sure you go do that. It's Wealth, Power, and Influence. You could just find it on YouTube, or you can go to. Actually, I just reminded me. I need to get it uploaded. Normally we don't upload them until Monday, but he decided that this one was important and timely enough that he wanted to just go out live to everybody instead of just to our private group. So I have to get it uploaded to the podcast. But if you're listening to this later on, then it'll already be uploaded.
You can find it. You can find it under brutalization, hate crime. You can find it if you just Google any of those things. It's pretty great. It'll come up there.
Yeah. Pop up. Yeah. Jason wasn't pulling his punches. I've had a number of different conversations about the Mises Caucus lately, and some of them here, some of them on other shows, some of them on that show, and that one was definitely felt the most like a like a genuine conflict. Like there's people are taking sides and digging in.
Like if I can just sort of just sometimes it's nice to zoom out. I think that might be a theme that we explore sometimes. Mm-hmm. But like if you want to kind of just have like if you want to kind of just a perspective on like where someone's coming from, what their relationship with reality is, if they should be sort of trusted. A good, like a really very easy barometer for that one is, someone who just decides, I think I'm going to be a cunt to a rich recon Marine. Like do you know what I mean? Like if you just, it's like, is this the gazelle that I'm going to fucking follow if I'm also a gazelle? And I know that gazelle's just like, all right, here's my decision. I'm just going to be a twat to a recon Marine with fuck you money. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's your life, bro. But like, I don't know. That just hit me right now. I don't know, man. How many things like are on the list of a higher up of things that like, you wouldn't do. It's way the fuck up there. It's way up there.
You know how there's men in the world who there's some men in the world who want to fight evil. They want to they see evil and they want to combat it. And then there's some men who, when they see evil, they want to fight it and they like it. They talk about it and they get a twinkle in their eye.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's kind of like a glint to them. Like, yeah, this is like, I will drop everything that I'm doing and prioritize this. Yeah. I've listened to Jason tell stories and seen that glint in his eye.
Yeah. You can totally see it. Yeah. And it's just like, then like Jason is like boyish and delicious, but he has those like shark eyes. You know what I mean?
All the ladies, right?
It's just, oh God, it's so good. Like, it's just like, it's just like, this kind of like a soft spoken, just like handsome devil or whatever, like very polite. Yes, ma'am. But it's just like, you just can look at him and just like, oh yeah, he's a fucking psycho. This is Jason. This is the most complimentary I could possibly be to you, sir.
He's like,
I can't fathom.
I've never met someone who gives fewer fucks. just in general, like as a positive character trait and as a negative character trait, just in general.
Yep.
He does not give a shit.
Yeah.
People try to troll him. They try to like, they think that they're the ones, like they'll get a rise out of him or whatever, and they think that, oh, they got one over on him. He could not care less. I have learned from him. I've taken on stuff from him about just not caring about things and like being able to prioritize and like focus on the right things. Like I've gotten a lot of that from him. Because I wasn't really naturally that way. I would take stuff really personally or kind of get upset about things and he is the most, he is DGAF in a human being. But then at the same time, he has a really, really big heart and a really big vision for how to basically the way he views his role in the world is that his responsibility is to create the best possible tool for helping the most possible people. And he doesn't, so if you're going to get in the way of doing that, then he doesn't mind steamrolling you. But that's his focus. So he comes off as this, like a hard ass, but then he also has this like kind of soft, gooey inside that's that he probably hate me ratting him out.
I love it. I just don't know who in their right mind could observe his existence for like any period of time and be like, yeah, let me do this. I mean, my attention.
The guy, when we changed direction in the show, Wildfire and Influence, and went from the Jason Stapleton program to the Wildfire and Influence, it was I didn't agree entirely with the way he was doing. I agreed with like the general direction, but I didn't agree with the method that he was taking, and the whole like just chopping the audience in half or more. Like he actively drove away a lot of people from his audience, and then people would come back and be like, "Oh, no one ever listens to you anymore." And it's like that's what he was trying to get. He was actively driving people away.
Because sound familiar now?
Right.
Unsubscribe. You know what? If you think like this, we don't want you to not.
Right. Don't share this with anybody who might disagree with it. We're explicitly attempting to create an echo chamber here. But the reason for it is because he recognizes that it's not a numbers game. That at least in the people sense, it's not a quantity game, it's a quality game. It's the quality of people that you have and the assets that those people bring to the table. That's what changes the game. That's what actually determines the outcome. Ultimately, there's 8 billion people, 7.5, 8 billion people in the world. And how many people actually run the world? A tiny fraction of a fraction of a fraction. That right there should tell you that this is the idea that the goal is to reach as many people as possible, that the goal is absolute numbers. That whole premise is rooted in democracy. That's rooted in the democratic assumption. And this is why libertarians are ultimately, especially with this radical individualism is the spirit of liberalism. So that's libertarians are they're not just like classical liberals, sort of, where they're like, oh, we're kind of about like that. But it's like they have refined the spirit of liberalism and taken it to its logical conclusion. And that's why I had my controversial tweet a week ago or so where I said that historically speaking, anarchy is a subset of democracy, because that's what it is. That the fundamental assumption of democracy of the radical individual and the individual being sovereign and then building your worldview upon a platform of reason. That is that's fundamentally, that's the spirit, that's the ethos of liberalism, which is, as we're I guess kind of alluding to at the title here, Christianity without Christ. Liberalism is ultimately Christianity without Christ. And that's how it was derived historically. It was people operating within a Christian connection and within a Christian worldview, I guess, within a Christian paradigm, viewing the world the way that a Christian views the world, and trying to reverse engineer God to the point where you reason him all the way out of the picture. It's the attempt to try to get to like base reality. That's what they're trying to do. The people who all the thinkers that ultimately accumulated their thoughts and their work together to what became liberalism and has continued to evolve from there. Once you've reasoned God out of the picture, you can only attempt to sustain that superstructure by force, because it will not naturally emerge, because the Christian picture of the world is emergent out of the character of God through his people. That's how it comes. It comes through God's people embodying him and manifesting it as love. And that will create the ideal libertarian utopia, the world that libertarians are thinking of, where property rights are respected absolutely, nobody violates the NAP, and there's no violence, absolute peace, no coercion, all that kind of thing. All of this, you're just describing heaven. You're attempting to create heaven on earth. And you're trying to do it without God. You're trying to make God extraneous to it, or just part of the picture and not the basis, not the baseline. So that's what I don't remember I don't remember if I first thought it or if I first heard it. I don't remember. Multiple people have had this thought. So I'm not claiming that it's original, but it did click for me without hearing it from someone else. I know that. I know that it popped into my mind. And I think that there's something, if you've experienced this yourself, you know that this is the case, that there's something to the thoughts that come to you on your own in your own process of thinking, and stuff that you've heard from someone else. Whether they could both be true, but the one that I think that makes the most impact on me is the stuff that I've reasoned to naturally myself, or that have even maybe not even reason. It could have been intuition or inspiration, but the ones that have happened to me naturally without having it given to me by someone else, those have been the most powerful realizations in my life. And so when I'm communicating with other people, I don't necessarily want to tell people what to think. I don't want to just give you a list of things to recite, or just tell you the list of facts and tell you how to interpret them. I want to lay out the picture for you, and I want you to derive the conclusions yourself. So I want to try to give you all the data points that led me to that conclusion, and I want to see if you come to the same conclusion. And if you don't, then I want to troubleshoot your thinking. I want to figure out why you didn't come to that same conclusion, to see what I'm missing, to see if I'm missing something or see if you're missing something. So this is the way that I think and that I talk. So when I'm communicating on shows, on interviews, or in the podcast here talking, for the most part, I'm trying to reason this stuff through out loud. And I also want to get these thoughts that I'm thinking about, and I want to put them in front of other people and see what they do with them. And if they wind up in the same spot as I did, then that is confirmation to me that I'm onto something. Because if other people are thinking it and believing it and putting together the pieces the same way that I am, then then that's a way for me to check myself, I guess. So
are you gonna talk shit, or are you gonna?
Yeah, we're gonna talk shit.
Cool. All right, sweet. Here we go.
Popular Liberty says love your neighbors greater than the NAP. Yes, that's really the gold rule versus the silver rule, kind of. So do unto others as you would have them do unto you, versus don't do unto others as you would not have them do unto you. That's just the bare minimum. That's thin libertarianism is it's honestly not even the bare minimum. I think thin libertarianism is incomplete. You're looking at the effect and saying, I like the effect, but I don't want to accept the responsibility for the cause. I don't want to do what's necessary to create the effect. I just want the effect. And I want to get a whole bunch of other people to all want the effect as well. And if I can convince sufficient people to want the effect, then it will just naturally appear. That's like the perspective of thin libertarians. Libertarianism is this is the incompleteness of it, that it needs something else. It's a piece of clothing that people are wearing, but what really matters is the person inside that clothing. Anybody can wear that clothing. We're watching this happen now. People are creating internment camps in Australia, medical internment camps in Australia, in the name of liberty. They're doing this in the name of freedom, because freedom is relative. It's, whenever you hear freedom or liberty, you should hear either from what or to do what. Freedom from X, or freedom to do X. Liberty from being liberated from something, or being at liberty to do something. There has to be something implied there, and that thing that's implied can't be a product of the individual will, because that's the spirit of anarchy. It's also the spirit of communism, the radical individualism. It doesn't work on like a social descriptive level within human beings. It doesn't work. But the reason that it doesn't work is because it's a denial of reality. It's a denial of the will of God as revealed through Scripture. But you don't even have to necessarily believe that to recognize the flaws in it, as is evidenced by plenty of people who are thinking and talking about these same things who aren't necessarily avowed Christians. They recognize it because it's a reality. They recognize it because they can see it. Let's see some of the comments here. Matt says, all libertarianism provides is a good system for property rights and econ, but no way to achieve it. No way to interact with power and achieve this system in practice. Right. It's just a description of the end.
The more important thing that he mentioned was that someone put up a gay BIPOC flag in his dorm hall, and that's unfortunate. It should have been like more of a pinup calendar with ladies. Am I right, brother?
This bit is going to be a lot of fun.
It's getting confusing, actually.
Yeah. Pretty soon you're not going to know what to think.
No, I already know. That happened in 2017 or so. It's just it's getting more and more confusing. I mean, this might be supporting listeners' material, but I remember walking into like a coffee shop around here around 2017 or so, 18. Now who knows? But I just saw some of like the young baristas that were working, you know, some like kids in their 20s or whatever, and they were just so cute and like not particularly masculine, I wouldn't say, you know. And I just had sort of the notion that as a more mature you know, man, that I could, and I just had something, I wanted to sort of take them under my wing, just have them like grab onto my pocket and just, you know, feed them like M&Ms and stuff. You know, and I could do that, and just I would be just as straight as I've always been, I think. You know, like what I'm trying to say, I believe that sexuality is fluid. Yeah. Someone just said no homo in the chat, which is pretty funny. I watched a skit, and the dude asked for like what flavor Italian icy, and he said coconut, no homo. I just want to fucking die when I heard that. It's so great. Oh fuck.
Coconut, no homo.
Yeah, you know, I wasn't like I mean that's my era of like, I mean, I was around a lot of people that used that very regularly, and like I was of the thought, just like, hey man, you know, I understand that, you know, like I can, like, you may be coming from a place where you got to just like clarify and everything like that, and just kind of you know double down, but if you're clearly not from a place like that, you're biting a little bit of like slang, but it just really just comes off as just sort of it comes off more that like, okay, I think I still I would ask some questions, you know what I mean, that I wouldn't have asked if you didn't say that. But
That
so I
reminds me.
didn't really like it at the time, but now because you can't say it, it's anything that you can't say, they just make 100 times more funny. You know what I mean? Like a strategically placed like F-bomb, not the standard F-bomb, but new F-bomb. Ooh, that's a nuke.
Like when Yarvin
used it. Guys, wasn't ready.
I mean Kurt. When Kurt used it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know him as one thing. You guys all know him as another. But yeah, I know who you're talking about for sure. Obviously.
This is an interesting new development. The new chief chaplain at Harvard, Greg Epstein, author of Good Without God, he is an atheist, and he's the new chaplain at Harvard. The New York Times tweeted his appointment reflects a broader trend of young people who increasingly identify as spiritual but religiously non-affiliated. It's just another point that illustrates this trend that's happening, where Christian institutions and Christianity, period, the appearance of Christianity, the what would you call it, like the desire to be seen as Christian is being embodied by not only non-Christians, but people who are hostile to Christianity. So this is the new atheist crowd, or the woke people, the SJW people. All these people they're openly hostile to Christianity, but they're occupying Christian institutions and advocating for Christian morality. The system of morality that they embody, the Western sense of morality, sense of fairness and justice, and advocating for victims, and that's all born of Christianity. That's the heritage of Christianity. But they're explicitly hostile to it. So this is where there's a realization that's been sort of kind of clanging around in my head, and I'm kind of coming to it and coming to accept it. There's a word for Christianity without Christ. There's a word for it, and it's a meme. A lot of people have been using it lately as a meme, but there's a specific concept. This concept has a lot of eschatological import, I guess you would say, and it's fun to say. Like you wanted to say you asked about if we were going to be talking shit. This feels like some pretty good shithousery, and I've said it a few times, but I'm wanting to, before I start really planting my flag on this, I want to make sure I can really defend this point, even as a troll point. But libertarianism is like the fullest, most like well-reasoned end point of classical liberalism, which is secularized Christianity. So libertarianism is Christianity without Christ. This means that libertarianism is the Antichrist. Libertarianism is the spirit of Antichrist. And I think a lot of people think of Antichrist and they think that it's there's going to be one Antichrist. There's like one figure who will be like the big ultimate baddie at the end of the movie, kind of. This is gonna be the guy, the big dark shadowy figure who's behind the scenes. It's possible that there is an actual Antichrist, but I'm compelled by the idea that it's an archetype, and it's different characters can embody the persona of the Antichrist. They can convey the spirit of Antichrist or embody the spirit of Antichrist. So in this case, if you go back through the Bible and just read, just Google it. If you've never even read, just Google. Just go anything the Bible says about the Antichrist. Listen to the way that he is described. Listen to the way that the spirit of Antichrist is portrayed. And you'll realize that an effective summation of it would be Christianity without Christ. That's almost like the technical definition of the Antichrist. So it's so compelling to me, and I don't know what to make of it necessarily, but it's so compelling to me that this development has occurred over the last, really kind of in earnest, I would say, over the last 1,000 years or so, this development across time of this. It's like there's gravity that's pulling us toward this radical individualism that's progressed through the entire process of the Reformation. And from the Orthodox perspective, you might say that the Reformation began in 1054. The Reformation didn't begin with Martin Luther's 95 Theses. It began before that with the East-West split. That's something that that's the road that I'm going down right now to study and understand that. But there's like a tractor beam that's pulling us with this inevitability toward this full realization of the kind of the liberal ethos, which is the spirit of Antichrist. And so that it's kind of like the picture itself, even like you kind of reason to it as a standalone kind of, but then when you take that individual point that you've reasoned to and you plug it into the historical view, it seems to fit real nice. It seems to just plug right in there. And when you plug that point in, that this idea that liberalism, that secular liberalism, that democracy, that these principles are manifestations of the spirit of Antichrist, and that we're building up to some kind of a major clash or some kind of major development. It just feels like we're living out what Revelation describes. It just I'm not trying. I guess I'm not really trying to talk shit or make it or like dunk on anything with this specific point. It's just I don't know what to make of all of this as it's kind of coming to me, and I keep just getting these little bits of inspiration and getting stuff from people here and there, and just putting together this picture is very interesting to me. And so it makes me. I think that what's going to happen over the next couple of decades is going to be really surprising. I think it's going to be shocking, and I think it's. Man, I don't want to go down that road. I don't really know how to explain that well enough, and I'm just going to light a firestorm. So I'll save that thought for later when it's more.
Far be it from you.
Right.
Far be it from you.
I'm the one who always avoids the firestorms.
Yes.
Speaking of firestorm, interesting little thing that happened in our life yesterday. So Amy's mom comes to our house 3 days a week and takes care of Eastwood for us. Helps babysit him while we're working. And so she was here yesterday, and she got a text or a call or something like that. I just was up here working, and all of a sudden I heard someone hollering for me, and I went down there, and they said that her mobile home, or not her mobile home park, but her RV park that she lives in is being evacuated for a wildfire. And we were, oh, well, that's great. She lives probably 35 minutes away or so. So we all piled in the truck and hustled down there, and wound up hanging out for a couple hours outside, waiting to be let back in and to go in and to check everything out. And the mobile, or the RV on one side of her, was part of the slide was melted or damaged just because of the heat of the fire. It came right up to the back edge of their park, and it was maybe 12 feet from the back of her RV was the line where everything stopped, maybe 15 feet. And there was embers that had fallen on the cushions on her little porch right outside her rig. That's how close it got to her, and even kind of burned up, and it burned a bush or some cactus right next to her rig. It was feet away from wiping out her, which she lives in full time. So it was a pretty stressful couple of hours there, but I think that everything is okay. And as far as we heard, there was one firefighter who got a small burn, was taken to the hospital. But otherwise, it seems like for the most part, things weren't too bad. I think a few people might have had some damage to their rigs, but everything was okay. So this is part of life in California this time of year. We're basically going to be socked in with smoke for probably the next 2 or 3 months, and such is life. But this is one thing that I won't miss when we leave California. And I'm actually taking this into consideration when we're thinking about different places we might live. I go check out that smoke map and I try to see if I look at the way the winds travel and try to figure out which places are the worst for smoke, which ones get hit the hardest. And those are the ones that I want to avoid because I just can't stand the haziness and the way it makes your lungs burn. My voice feels all like raspy and kind of burning from the smoke. And so yeah, just another thing to think about as we try to relocate out of here, which it's a lot of people seems like this is something that's on their mind. They're all preparing themselves to relocate. And that's part of why I think, if we want to get back into the shit talking part, that's why I think I get so frustrated with the people who are really advocating this LPMC thing. I think that's why it really frustrates me, because there's certain people who can afford it. There's certain people who, they're secure, they're stable, they're safe. Maybe they already control the source of their income, or they're already in a good community, a strong, stable community, and they're ready to weather the storm. They're ready to ride, to try to ride it out. If they have to batten down the hatches and ride it out, they're good to go. They're ready to go. And those people getting involved in politics, it's like, whatever. I don't really care what you do. The problem is that these kinds of movements require the active involvement and investment of people who cannot afford to get involved in a political movement right now, especially one that's doomed to failure on its own premises, and especially one that lines them up as formal, declared enemies of the regime. All those points together, those are the people who I want to talk to. Those are the people I want to reach. I want to persuade. I don't want to stop the LPMC from doing what they're doing. I just want to thin their ranks. I want to talk people out of following them, because I think there's way too many people who are going to get pulled into this movement, get sucked up into the romance, get starry-eyed based on the sales pitch that's promising them the moon. And by the time they realize that it's not going to work out the way that they're envisioning, and by the time they realize that they should have spent that time insulating themselves for the rest of this crisis, it's going to be too late. They'll have wasted their time and money, and now they'll be in a bad spot. And the people who talked them in to getting involved in that movement, they're not going to be there to bail them out. That's what's so frustrating to me about this. That's why I care. There's people like, well, you just do your thing and they'll do their thing and just kind of see what happens. Number one, I don't think that there's any validity to the idea that if everyone just divides up and attacks on a whole bunch of different fronts, that's rationally the best way to approach the problem. But that doesn't solve the problem that I'm talking about. That doesn't solve this, what I'm suggesting here. So if you are perfectly happy where you are and you're all geeked out about the LPMC, knock your socks off. I don't give a shit what you do. The people that I'm wanting to reach are the people like the ones that I get messages from all the time, who say, man, I don't know what got into me. I got sucked into that. And once I started listening to you and Jason and Pete and Buck and Adam and Populibs and Tho, and once I started listening to all of you guys, it clicked that this is a waste of time. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here. This is a waste of time and a waste of money. I need to focus on the stuff that matters. Those are the people that I want to talk to. And I don't care if there's 5 of them. I don't care if there's 5. I don't care if there's 5 million. Those are the people who I care about. And I don't want to see them get sucked into something like this. And also just the arrogance and irrationality of the whole thing chaps my hide. And so I want to throw a monkey wrench in whenever I can, just to be a troll.
Do you think that there's a certain element of arrogance to the movement?
Maybe just a little.
Okay.
Yeah, a movement that predicates itself on we need to wake people up and remind them that they've been supporting blood-soaked monsters and they need to repent of all of their sins before they're allowed to join our movement. Yeah, those people, that arrogance, yeah, I don't really have any fondness in my heart for that.
I think one of the things that my bit that I have of sharing like boomer memes, like part of, I mean, not that it's such a well thought out, but just sort of where it comes from is that is that like you may not like how these people put words on top of a picture to prove their point, but the point that they're proving is usually at least in the fucking ballpark of what you're going for. And
right.
Like, so, I know that like there's a certain reverence for law enforcement officers. And I could actually take devil's advocate for some, because like in a lot of the rural areas, I'll say it's different. I've been in some rural areas. I'm not in one where I live, but just like a half hour like into the mountains, the vibe's different with the cops. And I'm not saying that that they're going to be the great saviors or anything like that, but I would say that there's probably a lot of cops out towards the mountains that would have similar sort of sympathies to a lot of the ideas expressed on this podcast. But be that as it may, although it is fun just to share those memes because they're terrible, and like they're not my sense of humor, but I mean I make a lot of like molestation jokes, so I don't know why I would be the standard. Why I would think I would be the standard for what humor should be. It's like, look, man, we had a white pill story that in the supporting listeners group that we're in. Like we are in a separate supporting listeners group where we, though not financially, support a group of other people. And so there was a story that was shared with us about I believe sort of a school board situation. Sorry, Kurt. Sorry, but like there was a white pill from a school board, and it was about people overwhelming, I believe, a school board in fending off mask mandates. Is that the broad strokes of it?
Yeah, it was something to that effect.
So I'm not very familiar with the story, but I'm willing to bet. If I had to bet, I don't know, but I would say that closet toucher, Steve. That's great. I would say funny story. Don't listen to this in podcast form. You have to be in the chat. I don't know what's wrong with that interview. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that it was not just a sea of Rothbardian libertarians who took over this. You know what I mean? It's just like, look, whether you like it or not, these are the people that are on your side right now, and that's where the numbers are. And the idea that like sort of libertarians are going to be the catalyst for really getting anything done. That's a dubious proposition, man. I think you got to know where you're at. You got to know who you're in the trenches with, and and I don't know, man. Like resist the urge to shit on them constantly, just for your own self-interest, and because like really there's some true believers that are like you'd call them like boomer cons or whatever you want to call them, constitutional conservatives, whatever, but their sort of delusion that this is the United States of America, it like that delusion might be useful at a certain level, and maybe it is only the school board level, so it's not useful at like the federal level. You're gonna have a hard time like telling them that the Constitution doesn't exist. I would say, but look, it's just like that piss and vinegar that they have about the way that the country should be. Although you may not agree with it 100%, it may be enough for you to fight off a mask mandate at your kid's school if you have to send your kids to public school. But the headline isn't going to be libertarians overwhelm school board. Probably.
Right.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
And if it was, that probably wouldn't be a very good thing. Because the general way that that's going to be taken is not going to be favorable to the cause. That's what all of this stuff that man, I just feel like you've got a responsibility, just as a human being in general, to look at what you claim your goal is, and then look at the actual things that you're doing, and look at the impact of those things, and determine whether it's getting you closer to that goal or taking you further away from it. This seems like it's a very basic thing. Someone was like, Matt just says really basic, obvious stuff. Maybe that's not commentary on me. The fact that this stuff is so basic and obvious should perhaps be a warning sign that you're missing on some really basic stuff. But this is what I tried to get at in the conversation with Angela McArdle. So what's the goal? The goal is get liberty-minded people elected. Okay, so then what? Then what's the goal after that? We're just going to spread the message of liberty. So presumably the notion here is that the more people who hear the message of liberty, the more the state will go away, or something like that. Like you're saying that there's a causal relationship between people hearing the message of liberty and the state getting smaller or less tyrannical or something. That's not even defined. There's just kind of this vague idea of, well, state bad and politics, that's it. Like state bad and politics. So we're going to use politics to get rid of the state. But there's no like actual map for how this is going to happen. Okay, so how are you going to use the system to put itself to sleep? Through what method? And it's like they'll make all these really obvious, like maybe even kind of insightful points about the nature of the system and how it's oppressive, how it doesn't care about the people within it, how politicians are just completely corrupt and they're all for sale. They'll make all these points. They'll observe all these things. They'll observe the way that the media is directing events. They'll observe the way that the vast majority of power within the system happens through unelected bureaucracies, and that the politicians are just corrupt figureheads. They'll recognize all of this. And then it's like, okay, so how do we move toward liberty? Well, we gotta get liberty-minded people elected. How is that going to change anything? Even more, how is that going to change many things? Because you're not just trying to change something, you're trying to change something fundamental. So just getting liberty-minded people elected is just like tweaking stuff around the margins. And there comes a point where it's like, if what you're claiming you want and what you're actually accomplishing are really divergent from one another, then either I have to assume that you're delusional, or you actually want something different than what you claim you want. And I think that that's, to a large degree, what's happening here. I think people ultimately don't want liberty. They want to hear libertarian ideas made popular.
Popular liberty.
Popular liberty, yeah.
Yes.
They don't want to be they don't want to be an outcast, or they don't want to be different. They want to look around and they want to see people on their TV shows and movies and celebrities, whatever, politicians. They want them to like pay lip service to liberty. And then if you press them on it, it'll be, well, no, there's people in prison, and there's people, kids in Yemen, and there's stuff in Afghanistan. There's all these things, but you're not trying to solve those problems. If those were the things you cared about, those would be the problems you'd be trying to solve. You're trying to get liberty-minded people elected. You're trying to win a popularity contest. And you've talked yourself into the thought that, well, if we win this popularity contest, it'll change these other things. But it won't. And there's ample evidence for that. And the fact that people get so in their feelings about somebody saying that just reinforces my earlier point. Because if your goal is actually, we want to change these things, and people say what you're doing will not change those things, and in fact, it will make it worse, that shouldn't make you mad. That shouldn't upset you. You should be like, okay, well, what am I doing wrong? How do we do something that doesn't do that? Like, you would be interested in those ideas. That's what led me down this pathway. I haven't thought the things that I think now forever. These are realizations that I had. This is stuff I heard from other people. They were saying stuff, and I didn't like what they were saying, but I couldn't disprove it. So I went and I listened. And I read and I studied. And I was willing to have my mind changed. And it was changed. But if your goal is liberty, if your goal is actually liberty, then you have to start with imagining what that would look like and then reverse engineering from there. And when you reverse engineer that, you need to be coherent with each step in that process and test it against the actual world around you. Ultimately, the libertarian view of the world is incredibly shallow. It's very, very surface level. It doesn't address any of the deeper issues. Ultimately, it's really just kind of like, we like things that are good. And obviously there's rationality within it. There's complex rationales that people have worked through. But that's part of the point here, that for all of that complexity, it doesn't touch anything with actual depth. For all of that complexity, you're still just tweaking around the margins.
It sounds like me when I make love, actually.
Complexity and tweaking around the margins.
Zero depth also, yeah. A lot of complexity for no reason. Really just tweaking around the margins. Zero depth whatsoever.
Giggity. Josiah said ACAB, ACAB is a doomed message. You want friends, not enemies. If they ever might come around to questioning the blue narrative, they won't, because no one teams with assholes. Calling people bastards is seen as assholery. Yeah, all cops are bastards. And I understand the rationale, and I don't really like cops all that much, especially especially the way that they manifest for the most part now. But it doesn't take that much thought to recognize that a movement predicated on like complete antipathy and hostility toward the cops is not going to incentivize better cops.
Correct.
This should be very basic. So if your goal is to incentivize better cops, then you want to have a different movement. So the fact that you amplify this movement tells me that you don't actually want better cops. You're telling yourself you want better cops, but really, you just want to kick and scream about cops.
You want to be around all the cool people on TV, getting all the airtime.
Right, it's popular. Yeah. And I think that the libertarians, at least some of the libertarians I see who who tag themselves on to the ACAB rhetoric, I think they genuinely think that they think they care about bad cops. I don't think that this is necessarily malicious. I think it's lazy thinking. It's sloppy thinking, kind of like sloppy seconds. You don't want sloppy seconds in your thinking. I don't know. I don't think that works.
No. Or you might pay extra for it.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe. Depends.
One man's freedom is another man's slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One man's trash is another man's treasure. Value is subjective.
Oh yeah, it is.
I think you bring up a great point though with these people, with the boomer people, because they should be seen. If you're an intelligent, liberty-minded person, like, we shouldn't have to explain to you why Midwest boomer patriots are allies to you. It should be incredibly obvious. Now, allies doesn't mean shares every one of our values. Never has allies meant that. That's not an ally. That's a countryman. That's a family member. If they're an ally, it means that you have alignment on stuff. And so you work together to a common purpose. But there's this libertarian, and this is particularly there's factions of libertarians. So you've got like the fakertarian goofballs. I'll say that just because we're on YouTube. You've got those types, and then you have the libertarians who think that they're better than them because they're not some stupid fakertarian. You know, they don't like. They're not a bunch of progressives. Basically, they say, "Oh, I'm better because I'm not one of the fakertarians. I'm one of the smart libertarians." But they have like all the same characteristics and tendencies in all the same way. Ultimately, what makes them so repellent to me is that they share this like bizarre notion that their job as a libertarian is to go police everything else that everyone else is doing wrong and go set them right.
If you're Hegelian, that's like the antithesis portion, right? Which is basically, isn't that what like just like progressives sort of revel in doing, is like pointing out like that's a contradiction. It's rooted in that, actually. Yeah, I mean that's part of the birth of the woke movement was disenfranchised children of hypocritical Christians being all upset about their parents being hypocritical Christians and saying, well, I don't need God, I don't need the church, because look at all these people, it doesn't help. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Christian morality that was instilled in me, that I just accumulated by osmosis from living in a Christian country, and I'm going to achieve it without the church. I'm going to achieve it without Christians. We don't need them. We don't even need Christ. We can rationalize ourselves there on our own. So that's like the psychology, the root, the root of the psychology of like the millennial political generation, and so that's how ultimately the woke movement, the Church of Woke, their conflict with the immediately preceding generation, the moral majority kind of generation, their conflict with that is really a Christian civil war that's manifesting itself through our culture. This actually relates to a thread that I wanted to run through here. Let me share this thing. Did we ever get any indication about whether this special man may be joining us?
No, I haven't heard back from him. Oh. And given one of the things that he said recently,
maybe not.
I think he maybe not.
Yeah. Okay.
So do you need to take off?
No.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So let me get this.
Do you guys like that sort of inside vagary? You know.
See, I always wanted to be the
kind of thing that maybe we could shed some light on in a supporting listeners group. but not for the general show.
That's right. If you're in the supporting listeners group, you get to find out who was supposed to be on here today.
And intimate details of his personal life. No, I'm just kidding.
Let's make this a little bigger, so easier to read. Okay, so shout out to Sudoku Politburo, great name, at Ex Nihilo Pro Quo on Twitter. There's a few people that I follow on Twitter who have relatively small accounts. So he's got 348 followers.
Who are real smart and post really great things and seem to like us. And I could name 5. He's one of them.
Yes,
that I could name off the top of my head, but yeah, I know exactly what you mean. You're just like,
these are like some of the smartest people that I've ever met.
It's like, who the fuck is this? They like anything that we post about the fucking show, and they say just really brilliant shit. and again,
another one is this one here. For you guys that are watching, at Mazzaroth10, Mazzaroth 10, really, really good friend of mine in real life. One of the smartest people I've ever met, and one of the most genuinely good and kind people. So go follow him as well. He's another really good one. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so this thread here. Why are nearly all of the figures or thought leaders of early libertarianism atheists? Their thesis, put broadly, is that human reason can achieve a state of mutual cooperation where people are dissuaded or prevented from transgressing on others. The only requirement being that no person has power over another, everything else being a natural consequence of reason and human nature. The idea is utopian, a world where power hierarchies can be eliminated entirely, and it will be more peaceful for it. That framing there, I think, should be enlightening to you. That libertarianism, what libertarianism is. How do you say this? So we had the talk before about mouth sounds and brain pictures. And when people are communicating, you have the mouth sounds that you make, and then you have the brain pictures that come into someone's head. And when I'm communicating something, I'll make mouth sounds to try to communicate the brain picture that I have in my head to try to get it to someone else. But in the process of communicating that, something can be lost in translation for me myself. So I'll have this idea of the brain picture that I'm trying to create or to manifest. And then there's the process of bringing it into view, the process of actually creating it. And those things can become disconnected. The process that I'm engaging in won't actually reach the brain picture that I'm imagining. And I think that ends up happening here, where they have they've set out this goal, something like maybe you could say that the ideal libertarian utopia or Ancapistan might be a place where property rights are respected absolutely. That there's absolute property rights enforcement. And with absolute property rights enforcement, there's never any reason for conflict. So there's never any war or fraud or coercion or anything like that. So like that's the goal. The goal is to get to that point. But then the prescription of what they say is necessary to get to that point is something that's different, because absolute property rights enforcement is rigidly hierarchical. This is you're trying to create an absolute center of power to have that absolute property rights enforcement. Because if you have a whole bunch of random scattered property rights enforcement, there's no reason to expect that they're all going to act as a single unit, that they're all going to act as in unison, that they're all going to be faithful or true to their purpose. So the surest way to ensure that there's absolute property rights enforcement is to have the fewest enforcers overall. You just need a way to hold that enforcer accountable. So the world that they think they're trying to create is a world with rigid hierarchies. But the process they've set before them is a world where we have to tear down and destroy hierarchies, because hierarchies are corrupt. Hierarchies are bad and oppressive and tyrannical, whatever. They've said there's a specific kind of hierarchy that we have to try to get rid of. But there's an incoherency there that just saying that if we just tear down this hierarchy in this one particular type of institution, that's going to create the world that we want. Well, it won't. You're going to get a new institution that serves the same function, but is slightly different. Are you going to say, well, that's actually technically a different institution? So that, like, are we changing? That's not a state, so we're changing it now. Ultimately, the realization of the libertarian vision as it's currently constructed is fundamentally leftist. That's what the anarchist no rulers idea is, fundamentally leftist. But the vision they're trying to achieve with that is like an absolute right-wing order. So it's like there's two parts of the brain in an anarchist, a right-wing anarchist especially. There's two parts of the brain that just like aren't talking to each other. This was the conflict or the breakdown that got my attention, that put me kind of threw me into a bit of chaos for a while as I tried to resolve this issue, as I tried to make sense of that inconsistency. So our friend here, Sudoku Politburo, is saying is pointing out that the fact that this idea is utopian, a world where power hierarchies can be eliminated entirely, and that somehow that will cause peace. So he continues, but for human reason alone to displace all hierarchy must all mean that there is no power above humanity itself that must be reckoned with. This is where he's really starting to cook with steam. If hierarchy of power is not mutable at all levels, then it cannot be muted at any level, as power flows of its own accord. And libertarians have no theory for isolating a power without it diminished or abolished, so it is simply not recognized. Libertarians don't have a theory of power. Libertarians don't have a if you get them talking about power dynamics, this is what I loved. I don't remember who it was. It was talking to Jason, one of the LPMC guys, and he said something about like, if you were like me and you were dealing with actual power or understanding how actual power works, and I was like, oh my god, you guys have no idea how actual power works. Libertarians, that's their biggest drawback.
Is that like in some sort of visual form? Was that like a spoken conversation, or was that like, did someone type that out somewhere?
It was typed. It was on Twitter.
Lord. Oh God, if anyone finds that, that's amazing. Damn. That's so good.
Popular Liberty in the chat, he says archetropism is the theory of power they've been avoiding for decades. That's archetropism is really the there's something to taking a phenomenon and attaching a term to it. And you like put boundaries around it so it turns into something you can communicate, you can pass around to other people. Like a lot of human communication is just trying to create borders or boundaries around ideas. Yeah. there's a deep truth to this, actually, that boomer patriot instinct for borders is an instinct for truth.
Damn right.
It's a desire it's a recognition that there must be borders in order to have truth. That the borders are what outline or highlight the truth. So creating archetropism as a concept, the concept itself has always been there, and people could have tried to explain it, but to create it and to put borders around it and turn it into a standalone object that can be passed to and from people, that's a game changer. So shout out Popular Liberty for conceptualizing it that way and defining it. I mean, really, he could have called it anything. He could have called it wiggle wobble, and it would have still had the same effect. But it's even better that it's a word that you can actually break down the etymology of it, and it will describe to someone what it actually is. So I really like this idea of libertarianism as a conceptual Tower of Babel. It's and again, your spirit of Antichrist. This is that manifesting itself. And there's a reason then that libertarianism becomes such a religious faith, as I put in the title today. Libertarianism as a religion. I can't remember if I put a false religion or not. I hope I did. Yes, libertarianism is a false religion. It's I see this move that people want to try to say that libertarianism is, or that like that Christ was an anarchist, or that anarchy in the Bible that the Bible prescribes anarchy, or that heaven is anarchy, or some formulation like that. And I started down that road. I got to that point to where I was looking up, I was trying to understand. I was like, anarchy has to be just the way of heaven. It has to be the nature of the law under God. And it was right around that time, I guess, that I started going down this different pathway and realized that it's exactly the opposite. To the point that it's almost like to say that Christ was an anarchist, or that the ideal society within the context of the Bible is anarchy, like that almost strikes me as heresy. It's so completely wrong-headed. I understand where they're coming from. Like, I understand what they're trying to read into the text, but that's what they're doing. They're reading something into the text that is explicitly not there. The kingdom of God is a rigid hierarchy where everyone is defined by their duties, by their responsibilities. It's the exact opposite of an anarchy. And I understand that anarchy is, well, it's not no rules, it's no rulers. You can't have rules without rulers. This is this notion that you could say, well, it's no rulers. It's not no rules. It's just no rulers. This is the exact same thing as the communists saying that you can collectivize everything and it'll run itself. They're making the exact same error. That when you try to create the system with no one running it, you create a system where nobody's responsible for running it, but someone definitely is, because someone's always going to be running it. This is why libertarianism and communism are just two wings of the same bird. They're two wings of liberalism. It's liberalism taken to its logical conclusion with different environments. Matthew says he's okay with the H word on that one. Good. I'm glad. So Popular Liberty says if you take the 6 laws plus the definition, you can predict everything Matt's going to say. Yeah, like, and I don't. This is another thing I wanted to get out today. Like, I think I've been pretty clear from the jump that we don't have answers. What we have is questions that we're searching for answers to. And we want more people asking these questions, but not anybody. We don't just want anybody asking these questions. We want specific people. We want people who are worth listening to. We want effective thinkers focused on these problems to try to solve them, so that we can actually achieve some form of, I almost used a word that I shouldn't. Bad word. Progress is bad word. So that we can actually begin to create the type of world that libertarians claim they want to live in. I think that as far as I'm concerned, my ideal world hasn't changed. Like, the nature of it hasn't changed. It's just the construction of it that I'm reconsidering or rethinking or rediscovering. Jacob says, anarcho-Christianity was a short rabbit hole for me. Nice try, Satan. We're born with God-shaped hole and constantly finding ways to fill it with the wrong things. Yeah. Or as Populib says, a God-king-shaped hole. I see where you're going with that. Young said, asking the right question is half the answer. Yeah. This, man, again, our chat here is some of the best thoughts that I've ever read have come in our chat. Yeah. So what I was saying was that I think I've been clear from the beginning that this was not. We didn't start doing this show because we had like a plan or a we didn't start this show to educate people. We started this show because we wanted to.
No one else had a plan.
Right.
That people were looking to for a plan.
Right. Everyone's like assuming that there's a plan.
Yes.
But there doesn't seem to be one.
That first week of COVID, like that was my big takeaway. I was like, oh, okay, you guys got nothing. You guys are gonna make fun of everybody else for taking it lying down or whatever the thing was. And I realized at that point, I was like, okay, the futures of secret handshakes are much brighter than the futures of being right about everything.
Right.
Which is why, like, you know, on Twitter now, it just still seems like the name of the game seems to be, you know, let me show you how right I was, or this person was, or, you know, I think even Dave tweeted something about who was the best on COVID. You know who's been great on COVID? My mom. My mom nailed COVID like from the beginning. Like the reality that we are experiencing and looking forward to. Like I don't think from March of 2020, I don't think it comes as any surprise to my mom.
Really?
That doesn't matter at all. And why she's better on COVID than anybody is because she's fully aware that it doesn't matter, that she's great. That's the whole thing. So it's just like, okay, you know, I guess it's good to know like who knows stuff and who's right, and like that has like a certain utility. I am not 100% anti-chart and graph. I think graphs and charts have some utility, but they're not, you know, you just have to know what their utility is. And again, you have to kind of, you have to sort of measure the efficacy of any strategy that you're attempting. And, you know, it's like, okay, well, what do charts and graphs do for you? What don't they do for you? Is your future any different, like sharing these charts and graphs or not? You know, is there any like sort of measurable improvement that they bring? You know, have they kind of like worn out their welcome? Like is diminishing returns at this point, you know? And yeah, I think, you know, it was like, oh, no one has a plan. Okay. So if no one has a plan, there's other people who realize that no one has a plan. And like, I think, you know, for me, I wanted to create a place for people who realized that we may have thought that some people may have had a plan for this, and they don't.
Right.
and the other people who like haven't realized that, that's what the Mises Caucus is for.
Right. Yeah, it was a.
And no offense, on an individual basis, I like a lot of those people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it was not necessarily. I don't think you can hold it against them that they didn't have a plan, but as time goes on, increasingly, if you continue to not have a plan,
then what are we doing?
And you're not even making progress toward a plan.
Yes.
Then that's that's another issue. That's where I think, you know, like to he who much is given, much is expected, or much is required. The more knowledge that you are exposed to, the more that you understand, the higher of a standard you have to be held to. Higher of a standard you have to hold yourself to. The whole thing of like using charts and graphs and all that, it's kind of like if you were trying to sell a product to somebody, and for your like the commercial, you just used like you put out like a scientific study that proved that your product was superior to another one or something like that, and you just put like the abstract for the study and you like scanned across it for the commercial. That's not what the charts and graphs are supposed to be used for. You don't use the charts and graphs to sell to the average person. You use the charts and graphs to sell to the extraordinary people, to signal to them, to get them all in the same room, to actually do something for the plebs, for everyone else who's just going to follow along. Ultimately, this kind of strikes at what there's a thread here that I did this morning that I wanna probably wrap up the conversation on that relates to this. But I'll just get into it. So gotta do one more screen share here. Share screen, Chrome tab. Okay. So I follow disclose.tv's Telegram channel. I just have the notifications on for it. And that's what I use just to kind of stay connected to just a general overview of the current events and to keep, I understand what's going on for the shows I do and everything. So I strongly recommend it. If you have Telegram, just go follow at Disclose TV. It's a news aggregator, I guess. And they have a distinctly not just like conservative, but right-wing libertarian sort of bent. They're pretty based. So strongly recommend, big shout out to them. So a note came through on them this morning. It said, just in, conservative German media giant Axel Springer is acquiring Politico in a deal reportedly worth $1 billion. Looks like changes ahead at Politico going forward. And so my first thought when I saw that was thinking, okay, so Politico, $1 billion. So this is the real workings of power happening here. This is what you're watching. You're watching a major media giant acquiring a major media name. Politico is you can say what you want about it, but it's a significant institution. But my first thought was like, that's, so what? Like, this guy could be the most based right-wing dude in the world, and him acquiring Politico isn't really going to move the needle that much. One major media institution against all the rest, he's going to be a scapegoat or whatever. It's just me just kind of thinking through it and knowing that he's not, knowing that Axel Springer is I think no longer around, but the company is named after him. And so what I tweeted was, imagining a hypothetical headline. Just in, libertarian media giant Mises Institute is acquiring Politico in a deal worth $1 billion. Can you just imagine how big of a deal that would be? Like, think about that. Like, think if you woke up one day and, number one, you found out that Mises Institute had access to $1 billion to buy a major media outlet. Number one, that would be pretty freaking awesome. That someone with $1 billion in assets would be even remotely associated with something like the Mises Institute. That'd be pretty cool. But so it would be, this you can't just say, oh, it wouldn't really be that big of a deal. Like, this would very clearly be a huge deal, a huge advancement in the history of the quote unquote liberty movement. But can you also imagine how incredibly little it would actually change about the current state? So this is something that we could only aspire to, actually being on this level. The whole aspect of this Mises Institute being in a position to do something like that, having this much capital invested in the libertarian cause, being able to acquire a major organization like this, and just hypothetically imagine they completely overhaul it and they populate it with radical ANCAPs and people spitting hot liberty fire, and Ron Paul is personally involved with it, and put whatever you want in there. It would hardly move the needle. Here's why. So for every problem that it would solve, it would create 10 more. It would dramatically enhance libertarians' messaging capacity. Now, it would be way easier to get libertarian ideas in front of the common person. You'd be able to be exposed to a lot of people way easier. But it would also massively expand the attack surface for anyone seeking to undermine their efforts. So you'd win the popular awareness battle, but you would continue to lose the controlling our own narrative battle, and you'd lose any sort of strategic secrecy. So there's a Popular Liberty and John Hartman in the chat. They've done their Art of War series over on Popular Liberty's channel. One thing about the Art of War is that you don't let your enemy know what you're doing. Like, that's a pretty big deal. You don't broadcast your strategy because for like obvious reasons, you make yourself very, very easy to defend. So getting the libertarian message even more popular doesn't come without its costs. So in a case like this, now all of a sudden, Politico becomes like the voice of libertarians. Libertarians are able to get in front of anybody at any time, effectively speaking. They can run their stories and they can get their kind of got a seat at the table. They can elbow their way in and they can get access to different more sheltered areas where you typically wouldn't get into. You just have a seat at the table a little bit more. But you also are now going to be directly in the target of your opposition, because now you're starting to present yourself as a legitimate, a potential legitimate threat. Now you have way more at stake. You have way more on the line. And you have way more attack surface for people who want to combat you. Right now, libertarians don't really have much on the line. They don't really have much invested. They are easily the shortest stack at the table. So if they lose, it's kind of like, man, we didn't lose that much. Something like this, now you have way more to lose. So with libertarians having a seat at the table, so to speak, suddenly they would be eligible for the front of the line at the receiving end of both barrels of the regime. Right now, the regime doesn't care about libertarians beyond what it can use them for as pawns. They're not an actual threat. They don't even remotely pose a threat. But in a case like this, in a sort of hypothetical like this, it would be very easy to tell a story that this is a threat, that this is an actual threat, and we need to the cathedral needs to go into threat management mode and begin managing this threat. So the problem with this is libertarians don't have anywhere near the resources necessary to hold their own in that fight. You're not going to, you might get like a good first punch in, but you're going to get beaten down by an entire system that has been honed to a machine to identify an enemy, rapidly amass an immune response, and attack it and find its weak spot and drill into it. If you want to manage and combat that, you have to have fucking deep pockets. This was the Trump strategy, basically. He's like, I've got all this money and influence. I'm going to turn that into making myself into Teflon Don. And if you think that the Libertarian Party is going to get the sort of funding that Trump got, or even a tenth of the funding that Trump got, in general, from his own wealth, from major donors, from minor donors, you got another thing coming. That's not going to happen. Obviously, you're going to be operating with way fewer resources. So if you hope to compete, if this is the avenue that you want to go, if you want to go to this whole, like, we need to get out into the mainstream and get in front of lots of people and spread the message of liberty, this is the sort of thing you have to consider. This is what you would be going up against. So some more rambling thoughts. This is why I feel so strongly that the current path of the LPMC is so counterproductive. It's an attempt to cash in on an investment that's never been made. Persuade people to become libertarians, quote unquote, is only a valid popular tactic, because it's a tactic, not a strategy, if libertarians have something to offer people apart from rhetoric and philosophizing. Elect liberty-minded people isn't a strategy. Neither is roll back the state or spread the message of liberty. Those aren't strategies. At best, they're tactics. But even roll back the state or spread the message of liberty, those aren't even tactics. That's campaign fluff. Here's why. The message of liberty, which is the theory. When you say you want to spread the message of liberty, what you're saying is we need to get more people to understand the theory. We need to lead with the theory. We need to get people to buy into the theory. Have them understand all of the reasons that motivate us. Have them understand all of our why. Make them care about all the things that we care about. What do they care about? Fuck them. They need to care about what we care about. We need to spread the message of liberty. Tell them why all of our ideas are better than all of their ideas. That's the way to get popular support. That's not the way to get popular support. The message of liberty, that theory, doesn't do anything for anyone without a praxis. If you don't know what a praxis is, just Google it. Whatever that praxis is, once you have it, the theory is just auxiliary. Once you have the praxis, you just execute the praxis. That would be the definition of the praxis. The praxis would be the thing that you just execute, and the theory is just like the document you keep in your back pocket to show someone if they want to know why you're doing what you're doing. The only purpose of the theory is to explain or justify the praxis for those who are already drawn to it. When you live it, people are like, man, that's pretty good. Like, stuff's going really well for you. How did you get that? How did you get this life? How did you wind up where you are? What did you do? What did you do different? How can I get what you have? Then you explain the theory. You lead with the praxis. If people are interested, then you explain the theory. It's one thing to speak softly and carry a small stick. No one cares. Whatever. You speak softly, carry a small stick. No one cares. That's libertarians now. Go ahead, say it.
I don't have anything to say.
No? Not a single thing?
Nope. I
lob you that softball. You're just so short you can't even.
I wouldn't know.
You're muted. You muted yourself.
Oh, I wouldn't know what to say to that to make it humorous in any way.
Yeah, I know. You're not really much of a jokes guy. That's okay.
No, I try to keep everything between the lines, Matthew. I am seeing here that Dave and Jason appear to be organizing a conversation.
Yep.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
I think it's things to say to that. I'll tell you that.
It's gonna be very interesting. My expectations, I'll just say this, my expectations for the productivity would be measured.
Yes.
But it'll definitely be interesting.
Yes.
So little D's. There you go. Yeah, small PP. Thank you. Popular Liberty likes to talk about how there's Democrats and then there's Democrats and little D Democrats, and there's a reason that they're little D Democrats.
Oh yeah.
So libertarians are the littlest D Democrats. It's one thing to speak softly and carry a small stick. No one cares. That's libertarians now. The LPMC route is to speak loudly and carry a small stick. If you've got a small stick, the last thing you want is more people hearing you speak. Because then you're just advertising your own weakness. If you don't have any, if you don't have anything backing you up, if all you have is just your messaging, you don't have anything to point to, you don't have any institutional power, you don't have any resources, all you've got is just the purity of your message, then you're just begging to be made into prey. This is prey behavior. Speaking loudly with a small stick is prey behavior. Prey incentivizes predators. We don't want predators. The goal is to mitigate predation. Because people who are being preyed upon are victims. And the goal here is to actually defend and protect the victims. But the LPMC route, if you listen to them talk about it, their messengers out on the internet, they don't give a shit about the victims. They don't actually care about the people who are being harmed unless they can virtue signal about it. If they can talk about brown kids being bombed in Yemen, then they'll advocate for the victims. If they can talk about someone being locked in a cage because it gives them libertarian virtue signaling cred, then they'll talk about it. But if it's a Midwestern flyover BoomerCon, they deserve what they got. They deserve what they got because they supported wars. They supported blood-soaked monsters. They need to repent and kiss our ring before they'll be accepted into our movement.
I would like to put out some kind of very small reward for someone who can find when there were the lockdown protests. It was there was a couple memes that were going around all the big libertarian pages, and it was making fun of the Trump supporters who were protesting the lockdowns, and it was somehow it made almost no sense to me at the time, and certainly not now. But it was somehow critiquing them that they were protesting lockdowns, but where were they, when it was about kids in cages or something like that. And it was, and it just made my brain shut off. And I went back and I looked at a lot of the pages. I couldn't find it, which doesn't mean that it's not there. But I almost wonder if they deleted it, if they tried to go scorched earth on it, because it was just so ridiculous. But when you go on any of the sites now, everyone's calling for civil disobedience. I mean,
right.
not in a way where they're actually trying to get it to happen or try to instigate it themselves, but calling for civil disobedience or whatever. And it just made me recall that moment again, where there were some protests for some people who saw this going in a bad way, and libertarian pages just took the opportunity to shit on quote unquote Trump supporters.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the name of the game.
It's very safe. It's very safe to shit on Trump supporters because you're not actually going to put yourself at risk of anything. It's a good way to be.
It's not a controversial stance, no.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing brave about it. There's nothing brave or intellectually consistent or honest or anything like that. The world doesn't need more people shitting on Trump supporters. It doesn't provide any value. There's no. This is what just. To whom much is given, much is required. If you have an understanding of the nature of the state, the nature of the way that it preys upon people, the way it breaks people's legs and then offers them a wheelchair and says, boy, aren't you glad that I was here? If you have that understanding, then how would you possibly in good faith, it's not good faith, but how would you possibly in good faith approach those people with this attitude of, you need to recognize that we're right about everything and you're wrong, and you need to repent of your wrongness before we're going to allow you into our cool club? These people don't need to repent of their wrongness. They need to be given a better choice. These are people who are being abused by the system. And instead of offering them something better, the go-to move for libertarians is just to shit on them, because they'll get PR points from people who despise them. There's no value in being intellectually consistent. Well, I hate on both sides. Good for you. Here's a cookie.
Amazing.
There's no value in it. The point here isn't a political prove who's the most right competition. The point of this is pursuing liberty for the sake of the people who are being abused for the lack of it. And if you have an understanding of that system and you still choose to adopt that posture, I don't want anything to do with you or your movement. And it's not that I don't understand the purpose of the LPMC. It's not that I don't understand it. I understand it. I'm very, very keenly aware of why it was created and how it was created. I'm very keenly aware of their vision. And I'm saying that you guys lack empathy. You guys, as long as you're leading with this whole libertarian purity message, and you aren't leading with these people are being abused by this system, these people are victimized by this system, and we understand that, and we're willing to sacrifice to do what's necessary to free them from their abuse, to offer them a better option, you deserve the failure that you're going to get. You're trying to embody Christianity. If you're a libertarian, especially if you're someone who wants to recreate the Ron Paul revolution, I'm telling you, whether you think you're a Christian or not, what you're doing is you're trying to create a Christian world. You're drawing from Christian values, and you're trying to create a world based upon them. So just do that. You don't need Ancapistan. You don't need to elect liberty-minded people. You don't need to persuade people of the message of liberty. You need to start with empathy. Start with empathy for these people. Recognize that they have been abused and victimized and lied to and misled and stolen from, and offer them something better. Start with what they're looking for. What do they want? Not what do you want them to want. What do they want? What are they looking for? What are they hurting for? You start with that, and you'll get a very clear idea of what liberty actually looks like and how to get to it. Ultimately, libertarians don't have the resources necessary to compete as legitimate political players. So the libertarian message is hollow and insufficient. Politicians and political parties and political seats are secondary resources. They are tools wielded by those who already have wealth and power. They're tools for finishing the job, not starting it. Thinking that you can take over a political party and use that to create liberty is both arrogance and ignorance. You're pushing a rope, trying to cause a cause with an effect. If you're going to take over a political party, you need to be able to use it. And if you don't have wealth and power, you're not going to use it. It's going to use you. That's why I'm trying to get people to leave the ranks of the LPMC and do something that actually matters. Do something that will actually move the needle, that will actually change the world in a positive direction. And you don't need to save the world. Just start with your local community. If it just so happens that the infrastructure in your local area is most, that the Libertarian Party happens to have the best infrastructure in that area, and all of the local LP people are great people, excellent. Right on. Use the LP. What I'm talking about is the formal movement. This idea that we need to reignite the Ron Paul revolution. You don't have to reignite the Ron Paul revolution to take over your local community and like stop mask mandates or boot corrupt officials or whatever you need to do to protect your local communities. You don't need a Ron Paul revolution for that. You don't need a national movement for that. If anything, that national movement is going to make it worse because it's going to take away the strategic secrecy. It's going to tune people up you're around and you're coming for them. It's the speaking loudly with a small stick. If you've got a small stick, keep your voice down.
Okay. Oh, what? Sorry.
It's the whole, we need to start the Ron Paul revolution again. We need to restart this Ron Paul revolution 2.0. It's trying to cash in an investment that's never been made. There could be a time where political parties would be useful. In fact, right now, I think if you have a hard-on for political action and you want to actually help someone that knows what he's doing and is actually making a difference, sign on with Tho Bishop. He knows what he's doing and he cares about the people that he's working for. And you can tell. He's seeking points of alignment, leading with them, aligning with people based on those points of alignment, and then letting his influence move them in a positive direction. He's not starting with this. First, you guys need to repent of all the bad politicians you supported and all the bad policies. You need to swear allegiance to liberty, bend the knee, kiss the ring, admit that we were right about everything, and then you can join our movement. Libertarians have no ground to stand on being judgy and condescending and picky about who their political allies are going to be. You don't have any ground for that. You got to take what you can get. Find points of alignment. This isn't even a what's right or wrong point. This is just a strategic point. Find a point of alignment with people and work that. You don't need to convert people to the Ron Paul religion. Focus on actual people, not hypothetical people. Focus on actual people who have actual problems that you are providing actual solutions to.
So you don't think it was good for libertarians to make fun of all the Trump supporters sometime roughly around the election night? That wasn't strategically? No. Okay.
No, that's I mean, if you find yourself aligning with the people who are attempting to enslave the entire world under medical tyranny, that's a pretty good signal that you went wrong somewhere. And that your whole, like, we transcend left and right and we're the intellectually consistent ones is a load of horse shit. By their fruits you shall know them. If your fruits are, you're aligned with the fruits, then you're wrong.
Yes.
So the last tweet here was just, so not only is the LP not cost-effective or useful as a tool for promoting the libertarian message, the libertarian message itself doesn't and won't actually create a libertarian world of secured property rights. Just because you want it to doesn't mean it will. Again, this is the whole, like, judge what you're doing and what the effects are of that and what you're claiming you want to do and what those effects and what effects you're claiming that you want. Because there's a pretty wide divergence that I see right now between the people who are calling for a second Ron Paul revolution and the actual effects of the things that they're doing. If you get into business, so Jason Stapleton has his digital business mentorship that I've been working with him on. And I've spent the last couple of years just completely immersed in marketing and advertising and talking about the principles of communication and influence and how to scale organizations, how to scale movements. Sometimes those movements are called a business. It's the same thing. It's a movement of people built around a specific idea who are trying to sell something to the world. You can start with something that you're interested in, something that you like, and something that's valuable to you. And then you can try to sell it to people. And if you approach that sales process through your own eyes from like a me-focused idea, like here's a product that I care about and here's why it's important to me and here's why I want you to purchase it, your business is going to be a failure, and it deserves to be. The key to successful sales and marketing and advertising is that it begins with the consumer and what the consumer is struggling with, with the consumer's demand. It begins with the pain point. Jason always says that you enter the conversation they're already having in their head. If your product that you're selling requires your customer, client, lead, target, if it requires them to do all of the work, to put themselves in alignment with you, then your product sucks. Your product will fail. Because that's not how humans work. If you want to successfully market and sell a product, you have to start with the people you're selling it to. You have to ask yourself, what do they want? What are they struggling with? What are their problems? Often, an easy way to do that is to look at yourself and try to understand how it's affecting you so you can kind of project and understand how it's affecting them. Because you can only ever see through your own perspective. You can never see through the perspective of someone else. But you can do your best. You can get as close as possible. That takes trial and error sometimes. Some people are better at it than others. But you have to begin with the pain point of your target. And then from there, you have to get on their wavelength, connect with them, see the world through their eyes, and deliver your message to them in a way that they'll understand. The onus is on you for all of that. So if your sales process isn't working, if your copy isn't converting, if people aren't clicking, or if people are clicking and they aren't buying, that's on you. You're the one who has to solve that problem. You're the one who has to fix that. You're the one who has to change, not them. It doesn't matter if you have the best product in the world for you if nobody else wants it. You have to create the product they want and sell it to them. Or you have to figure out how to take the product you currently have and frame it to them in a way that they want. None of this is happening at all in libertarian political movements. It's all about how we need to take a batch of ideas, a whole bunch of intellectualizing, and preach sermons at people, telling them about how evil they are and how much they've sinned, how much they're living in sin, and then tell them that we have a better way. What is that way? Well, we have an idea of what it might look like, but we don't have anything that'll get you there. We're just waiting for everybody to change their minds. We're just waiting for everybody to agree with us. And once everybody agrees with us, then the world will be good. That dog don't hunt. It's not going to happen. And if you disagree with me, I don't care. I'm not interested in debating or arguing with people about it. I'm looking for people who already agree with me. I want our show to be an echo chamber. I don't care about converting people, because conversion doesn't happen like this. Again, you're entering the conversation they're already having in their mind. They're already having that. You weren't converted to libertarianism by anybody. You went looking for it. You may have heard something that caught your attention, but that's because you were already inclined for that to catch your attention. Someone connected with you in a way that you were already thinking. It began with them. If it's you, it began with you. You're the one who first became interested in liberty or libertarianism, even if you didn't know what it was. And then you sought out people based on their brand, based on their public image. And then you did the work to learn the rest of it. You're not going to go out to people who don't agree with you and persuade them to agree with you just purely on an intellectual basis. Again, it leads with the praxis. You have to start with the praxis. You start with you embodying your message. This is the market, right? Like, you bring your product to market. Libertarians don't have a product. They haven't brought a product to market. They're trying to sell a description of their product. They're trying to get people to buy a product they haven't even created. And not only that, they expect everybody else to create the product for them. It's not going to happen. And it shouldn't happen. You've been called to leadership. If you have this understanding of the nature of the state, and you feel compelled to take action, to take human action, that's an indicator that you've been called to leadership. And you have to act like a leader, which means you need to begin with empathy and compassion and genuine heartfelt love for the people who you are called to lead. And then you need to lead them effectively and humbly. You haven't been called to preach a message to someone, to try to knock down all their arguments and get them to see the world the way you do, so then they can do some undetermined thing, like, I don't know, sign up for the LP or like what, like, just it's like you have to like say the specific things. Like, the way that you become a libertarian is by going on the internet and saying libertarian things and agreeing with libertarians. But there's no actual embodiment of it. It's just go talk about libertarianism to people. This directly mirrors, again, this is Christianity. This directly mirrors modern evangelical Christianity, where the actual acts have been devalued, and it's just about faith, having faith in the grace of God. And religion has become a list of doctrines. You like pay intellectual assent to a list of doctrines. Doctrine isn't religion. Religion is, someone up in the chat here earlier broke down the etymology of religion. Let me find it here real quick. I hope he didn't delete it. I know what it is, but I wanted to read what he said. Here it is. Minder. Religion comes from the word religare, which means to bind. So calling libertarianism, while calling it the ultimate individualism, somewhat points to the idea that it's anti-religion. Okay, he didn't say something that I thought he said. It is to bind. Libertarianism or religion means to bind. It's like that which binds. Your religion is that which binds you together. It's the ethos that holds your community together. But it's active. It's not just a bunch of things that you think. Your thoughts aren't what hold you together, because you can't see someone else's thoughts. You can't trust someone else's thoughts. What you see is their behavior. What you connect with, what you engage with is their behavior. You're identified as a member of the tribe because of the acts that you take. Your actions, your ritual behaviors are what identify you as part of the tribe. So the religion that binds you together has to be active. It has to have a praxis. I like Popular Liberty's word praxian. I haven't identified myself with it just because I don't know necessarily what's going to happen with it. And I know that I could change that, but I don't want to. I'm just so hesitant to identify myself with a title anymore, because I'm afraid of identifying myself with a title and then later on, like, I don't want to be inconsistent. I don't want to keep rebadging myself or rebranding myself over and over again.
Matt prides himself on consistency. It's his most sacred virtue.
I aspire to consistency. I don't pride myself in it. But I think praxian is a fantastic word. I think that I think being praxian in your nature is a good thing. That's another good word to coin and to have that as kind of part of the vocabulary. But I don't remember what I was saying. I think that religion is what binds. So libertarianism is just it's a form of, it's like a secular atheist denomination of evangelical Christianity. And it has some of the exact same flaws, which is this idea that evangelism is going out and preaching sermons at people and trying to get people to think all of the right thoughts. The way that you act, the things you do with your body, the way you live your life it's an individual matter. It's just that's up to each individual person. All that's important is that you pay intellectual assent to a list. You check off all the list of doctrines. You give yourself the label. And each opportunity you get, you tell somebody else all the things that you know that they don't know. And then you try to get them to do the same thing. That's the current composition of libertarianism. That's the so-called message of liberty that people are trying to sell. And the message itself is flawed. There's, at every level of this process, there's a breakdown. And so I'm keenly aware of the fact that when I talk to people about this, sometimes they think that I'm moving the goalposts around. Because I'll start a critique on one front, and then the conversation will move to another front, and I'll still be critiquing on that front. And my critique isn't moving. The critique exists on all of these fronts because it's so flawed. But again, okay, so it's 2 hours and 15 minutes. I would just want to say one more time that if you hear all this and you're still bought into the LPMC and you want to spread the message of liberty and you want to start another Ron Paul revolution, I have nothing against you. Knock yourself out. I don't care. The people that, when I talk, the people that I want to hear me are the people who are already inclined to hear what I'm saying and who see the world the way that I do. I'm trying to meet people who are already having this conversation in their head, and I want to have the conversation with them. That's been my goal with this show. And then Steven wants people to have a plan. And right now, it seems like nobody has a plan, a coherent one. But we have a very, very good plan for you. 2 of them, in fact. The first plan is go to palomaverdecbd.com and use promo code KING to get 25% off any order over $75 or more and get yourself some quality CBD products from some quality people.
If you want to have a conversation with Matt in your head, or if you find yourself pushing a rope, referenced earlier, but I'm still calling it back, head on over to palomaverdecbd.com and use promo code KING.
That's right. The second thing that you can do, the second plan that you can partake in, is go to subscribestar.com/kingpilled and sign up for the supporting listeners group. Yeah, Popular Liberty does have a plan. That's true. And you guys are going to hear about it soon. But yeah,
if you tune in to his upcoming appearances on the Come on, Pops. I
think he's going to be talking to Pete.
Oh, yeah. He'll be talking to Pete and maybe somebody else that we may have forgotten. Tonight, he's talking to somebody, I think.
And we definitely do have, I know for sure that we have a very interesting guest on Monday. We're going to have a fun person who's going to join us. We're going to have some really good conversations. But yeah, so subscribestar.com/kingpilled. Go sign up for the supporting listeners group. And I'll say again, for those of you who weren't here at the beginning, when you sign up, we're still figuring out exactly how we're going to host the supporting listeners group and the process for getting it there. So after you sign up, then just wait to hear from me probably. Maybe Steven, but probably me. I'll reach out to you and give you some guidance on where to go to connect with us, and we'll get that set up. And then there's multiple tiers and some other different perks that we're going to be introducing in the future. And then there's other perks that we're happy to introduce as well. If you guys have any ideas of stuff that you want us to do, it's very likely that we're going to reject anything you suggest, but you're welcome to suggest it anyways.
Yeah.
And we'll take it under advisement.
If you do hear from me, you won't be hearing from me. You'll be receiving unsolicited pictures. And that actually might be a perk at a certain level, depending.
That's the nature of the Supporting Listeners Group. It always has been. You guys just didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
All right, folks. Well, thank you much for listening. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, subscribe, and share. Share the show. Subscribe. Right now, we've got 24 people watching and only 15 people have liked, but 3 people have disliked. So that's 18 interactions. So that's better. That's better.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate you guys. We appreciate you guys listening and supporting us. And we look forward to talking to you again on Thursday. Oh, also you can follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled, and you must follow Steven. I'm going to mute him. You must follow Steven at Messina Inc. Follow him. Tell him he's beautiful. Give him your love. And we'll be back here on Monday.